as we've heard earlier, as the New York Times article said it, as we all believe it in our core, that, our history, our art, our culture, it's an integral part, both in the bad part of that history and culture and the good part of that history culture, and it needs to be protected. And, then we have the concept of being real honest, being very honest about what climate change is doing to all parts of our lives, and that in so many different ways that we might not have thought of, we need to both address the underlying cause of the climate change and then do whatever we can to protect us. I really did appreciate Mr. Vondervang's assessment that technology and science is there. We just need to put it into action. We need to fund it. We need to get those plans in place and then actually make it happen. And we've heard today a lot about how the Smithsonian plans to protect its existing work, but I'd like to pivot to future collections. And actually the latest museums, as you were talking about the museums that are most at risk, the newest museums are in a better position. But I want to talk about the National Museum of the American Latino and the American Women's History Museum. There are many, myself included, who want these museums to be located on the mall, right? Because that is where all the key stories are told. And if we are going to have sort of equality and geographic setting to tell those stories, having it on the mall is key. So we can plan, we can use science to how do we now build those museums in a way that protects them as we look at these futures, so that they are part of the planning and part of the building of how we protect them in all of the museums. So Director Bechtel, can you discuss how you're incorporating resiliency into your plans as you look at those facilities? I understood that when you were thinking about the National Museum of African American History, you also included that. Can you tell us, how you're using those lessons as you plan for the Latino History Museum and the Women's History Museum?
Absolutely. I think our African American History and Culture Museum has essentially showcased that if we know what that science is and where that location is, and we can study it, then we can build in design measures to protect to protect that facility. And in relationship to both of the new museums, we are also planning on not housing the collections in these facilities. So the collections will be housed in state-of-the-art facilities that are built to house collections, and they will be off the National Mall. So both in Dulles, Virginia, as well as in our Suitland, Maryland campuses. Both of those campuses do not have flood issues. There's other risks, as you can imagine, but there's flood risk is not one of them. So that's really what we're doing with the new museums, and we're not really worried about being able to place those museums. If the sites are selected that are on the nation's mall, we will design in flood resiliency into those two new museums.
Thank you very much. I think that's just so very wise. You're taking that off the table. There are other considerations, but let's focus on the why with leaving that out. I don't have a lot of time, but it seems to me that as I've been listening to this hearing, as I read the testimony, it's Congress that needs to give you some money to be able to get this done. What are some of the other major barriers to implementing the plan? If I told you, what do you need from Congress? What's your answer going to be?
If I was to answer first up, it is your continued support. I would say that the Smithsonian Institution is extremely fortunate to have the federal support that it does. We're also very fortunate to be able to fundraise and also have private and corporate support. So we sort of get the best of all worlds. And I think it behooves us to plan accordingly, have solid planning, and be able to give notice both to Congress as well as OMB what our requirements actually are.